And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story that begins not with a shouted declaration of war, or the grand coronation of a king, but with a quiet, almost secret sound, the scratch of a quill on thick, creamy parchment. A story about a promise made not with a kiss, but with an ink stain. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel so inclined, you could even let me know in the comments what city or part of the world you're listening from tonight, and what time it is there. It's a quiet way of knowing we're all resting under the same wide, dark sky. Alright, let the shadows in your room grow roll long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing. And together, let's allow the story to begin. The story of your future doesn't start with you. You aren't even in the room where it's being written, where you are perhaps in a sunlit garden, practicing your needlepoint, or listening to a tutor drone on about genealogies. Your life is being negotiated in a dark, with minus-spangled chamber miles away. The air in that room is thick with the smell of beeswax from the candles and the faint, sweet scent of spiced wine on the breath of the men leaning over a heavy oak table. These men are your father, your uncle, perhaps a bishop with a keen legal mind. They are bundled in velvets and furs, their faces carved from shadow and candlelight, and on the table between them, looking small but feeling impossibly heavy, is the document, the marriage treaty. You are 15, or maybe 16. It's an age where your world is supposed to be opening up, but instead, you feel it constricting, being neatly folded and tucked into the clauses of this contract. You are the subject of every sentence, yet you have no voice. Spoiler alert, they don't ask for your opinion. This isn't a negotiation about your happiness. It's a strategic merger. Your family has lands, but needs a stronger political alliance. The other family has a royal connection, but their treasury is looking a little thin. You are the solution, the human seal on the deal. It's all very romantic, in a corporate takeover sort of way. You picture the parchment, the Latin script flowing across it in an elegant, spiddery hand. It's a language you may not even read fluently, but it dictates everything. It lists, with painstaking precision, the lands and properties that make up your dowry. Not just the southern farmlands, but the southern farmlands, with its 3 mills, 27 peasant families, all associated livestock, and the rights to the timber in the eastern woods. It details the castles, the silver platters, the number of horses, and the chests of linen you will bring with you. You are a walking inventory, a catalogue of assets. Here is a little detail they don't often put in the grand histories. These contracts could get incredibly specific, sometimes ridiculously so. They might include clauses about who is responsible for paying for the wedding feast, or a condition that your future husband must provide your father with 10 fully armed knights in the event of a border dispute. One of the most critical parts, often overlooked, was the dower. This wasn't your dowry, which you brought to the marriage, but what your new husband's family had to set aside for you, for your financial support, should you outlive him. It was a pre-negotiated insurance policy, and a sign of how unsentimental this whole affair truly was. They were already planning for his death before you'd even met him. And the man you are being promised to, his name is on the document, of course. A name you've heard, maybe once or twice. He is a duke, the baron, a prince from a neighboring land. You've never met him. You can't picture his face any more than you can picture the dark side of the moon. All you know is what the treaty implies: he is powerful, he is suitable, and he is now your destiny. Did they ever have to ask you? Legally, historians and legal scholars still debate the practical reality of this. According to the Church's canon law, a marriage was only valid with the free consent of both parties. A priest was supposed to ask you, point blank, If you entered this union of your own free will, and in theory, you could say no. But what did free will mean when you were a girl in a world run by powerful men? When your father, your king, and your god all seemed to be pointing you in one direction. Saying no wasn't just a personal choice. It was an act of political defiance. A move that could shatter alliances and plunge families into disgrace, or even conflict. So you would be coaxed, and reminded of your duty until your free will just so happen to align perfectly with the treaty that was signed months ago. The candle in that distant room is finally snuffed out. The wax seal is pressed, its crest making a deep red indentation in the future. The deal is done. The men shake hands. Their work complete. And it's only now, perhaps days or weeks later, that someone finally decides to tell you. Your mother, maybe, in a quiet moment, she explains your duty, your great fortune, the honor you are bringing to the family. And as you listen, the world of needle-pointing tutors dissolves. A new reality takes its place. A stranger is coming, and with him, a ceremony you are already beginning to dread. The weeks that follow the announcement are a strange, breathless blur. It's as if a clock has started ticking. A countdown to a day you both anticipate and dread. Your life, once measured in seasons and holy days, is now measured by the frantic work of seamstresses and the arrival of couriers with messages from your future. You are fitted for gowns of impossible richness, the fabrics whispering against your skin. You are instructed on the etiquette of a new court, the names and titles of people you must impress, the political factions you must navigate. It's a crash course in becoming someone else. And all the while, you are trying to construct the picture of this man, this stranger, from the thinnest of threads. Rumors arrive. Of course, the court loves nothing more than gossip, and you are now its most fascinating subject. The ladies in waiting whisper that he is a brilliant horseman. A visiting merchant says he is stern, but fair. A sour-faced cousin of yours claims he is claim-featured and has a temper. The stories are contradictory, fragmented, and useless. They are like trying to understand the sun by staring at its distorted reflection in a puddle. Sometimes, if the families were particularly forward-thinking, a portrait might have been exchanged. A small, stiff painting in a jeweled frame. You've spent hours staring at it, trying to find a flicker of life behind the flat, painted eyes. The artist, naturally, was paid to be flattering. He has smoothed the skin, strengthened the jaw, given the hair a noble sheen. You know, with a weary certainty, that this painting is a lie. A well-intentioned, beautifully executed lie. But a lie nonetheless. Then, the day comes. Trumpets sound from the outer walls. A bright, brazen announcement that cuts through the morning air. He has arrived. The entire castle hums with a nervous energy, a current of anticipation that you feel in the stone floors beneath your feet. You are dressed, corsted, and arranged like a priceless vase, placed in the center of the great hall to await his entrance. The weight of 100 pairs of eyes is a physical pressure on your shoulders. The great doors swing open, and a river of new people flows in, knights in polished steel, lords in unfamiliar colors, and somewhere in the middle of them, him. For a moment, you can't pick him out. Then the crowd parts. And there he is. Your first thought is nothing. There is no bolt of lightning, no swell of music. He is just a person, younger than you feared, older than you hoped. His hair is a common shade of brown. He is not as tall as the rumors said, nor as short as his detractors claimed. He walks with a certain stiffness, a self-consciousness that you recognize immediately, because you feel it in your own bones. He doesn't look like a monster, which is a relief. He also doesn't look like the hero of a ballad. He looks nervous. He stops a respectable distance from you. The whole falls into a profound silence. Misses it. The first meeting. Your eyes meet across the expanse of polished stone, and in that single glance, 1,000 questions are asked and none are answered. You execute the curtsy you have practiced 100 times. A deep, graceful sinking motion that makes your heavy skirts pool around you on the floor. He bows, a mirror image of formal gesture. It's a slow, silent dance that you both know by heart. He might offer a compliment, something rehearsed and delivered to his advisors beforehand. My lady, your beauty surpasses all the tales. You, in turn, offer an equally scripted reply. My lord, you honor our house with your presence. The words feel hollow, borrowed from a play. It's the most important job interview of your life, and you've both already been hired. In some cases, this public viewing was literally the first time the couple ever laid eyes on one another. But sometimes, a truly bizarre ceremony took place, first the marriage by proxy. This was especially common if the groom was off at war, or if the bride and groom lived in different countries. I stand in. Often a high-ranking nobleman would take the groom's place at the altar. And here's where it gets strained, to legally symbolize the union. The proxy might then proceed to the bridal bedchamber and lie down on the bed next to the bride, fully clothed. A naked sword was often placed between them. A very clear and probably very necessary symbol that this was a legal formality, not a consummation. Imagine that. Lying in bed with a man who was not your husband, separated by a piece of cold steel, all was a matter of state business. But for you, today, the man is real. He is here, and as you stand back up from your curtsy, you look at the stranger and grapple with the dizzying reality of your situation. This person, whose hand you have not yet touched, will soon share your name, your table, your title, and your bed. His triumphs will be your triumphs. His failures, your shame. His children will be your children. Scholars still argue about the exact level of pre-wedding contact allowed for couples in your position. Was there a carefully supervised walk in a garden later that day? By formal dinner where you sat side by side, exchanging stilted pleasantries? Or was this, truly, the extent of your interaction before the vows were spoken? The historical record is often frustratingly vague on these intimate details. For many, the marriage was a public contract, and the private relationship was a secondary concern, left to be figured out after the ink on the register was dry. He offers you his arm. His glove is fine leather, and you can feel the warmth of his hand through it as you tentatively place your fingers on his sleeve. It's the first time you've touched. The crowd in the great hall lets out a soft, collective sigh. The first test has been passed. You look like a couple. The performance has begun, and you both know it will only get more demanding from here. As you walk on his arm, a slow and stately procession through the smiling, bowing courtiers, you become acutely aware that you are not just a young woman. You are a geopolitical asset on parade. Every person you pass is not just looking at your face or the elegance of your gown. They are looking through you, at the castles and river valleys you represent. Their smiles are not for you, but for the stability your union promises, for the trade routes that will now be secure, for the threat of a rival that has just been neutralized. You are a treaty made flesh, and this is your signing ceremony. The weight you feel isn't just the heavy brocade of your dress or the cool press of jewels against your neck. It's the phantom weight of everything you bring with you, in your mind. You can almost see it trailing behind you like a ghostly train, a map of your lands. Shimmering in the air, there are the forests, rich with timber for shipbuilding. There are the quarries, yielding stone for new fortifications. There are the port towns, bustling with merchants, their taxes now destined for a new treasury. And there are the people, thousands of them, whose allegiance and labor are now part of the package deal. Your feelings about the rolling hills you grew up exploring are not listed as an asset. And so, in this transaction, they do not exist. This, of course, is your dowry, a concept so central to your existence that you can't remember a time you didn't know the word. It wasn't just a chest of gold coins, though that was often part of it. For someone of your station, the dowry was primarily land and the power that came with it. The negotiations that happened in that candlelit room were just about hammering out a number. They were about horse trading territories, arguing over the rights to a particular river, and ensuring that the properties listed were profitable and strategically sound. It was the medieval equivalent of a corporate due diligence process, and you were the company being acquired. But the flow of wealth wasn't just a one-way street. And here's a detail that adds another layer of strange, official romance to the whole affair. In many parts of Europe, there was a custom known as the Morgengabe, or the morning gift. This was a gift from the husband to the wife on the morning after the wedding night. It was hers to keep, her own personal property, not to be controlled by her husband or his family. But it wasn't just a sweet thank you for marrying me present. Its purpose was deeply symbolic and brutally pragmatic. The gift was a confirmation that the marriage had been consummated. It was the groom's financial acknowledgement of his wife's virginity, and a reward for providing the proof that was so essential to validating the union. So as you walk beside this man, you know that tomorrow morning, if all goes according to plan, you will be richer. It's a bizarre performance bonus for a duty you have yet to perform. This whole financial tangle is something historians still passionately debate. Was the dowry to love female oppression or a source of female power? On one hand, it's undeniably the price tag placed on a bride. It commodifies you, turning you into an object of negotiation between men. Your value was explicitly and publicly calculated. If your dowry was small, you were less desirable, regardless of your character or intelligence. But on the other hand, a large dowry gave a bride a certain standing in her new family. She wasn't just some girl who showed up empty-handed. She was the source of their new wealth and influence. In some legal systems, she retained a degree of control over her dowry lands, and her husband couldn't simply sell them off without her consent. It could be a shield, a source of leverage, a guarantee that she would be treated with a certain level of respect. Your dowry was both your cage and your cushion, and which one it felt more like often depended on the man who now held your arm. For now, all you know is the pressure to be worth it. The value of your dowry has been agreed upon, the papers signed, but the transaction isn't truly complete until the marriage is sealed, legally and physically. Until then, you are a promise, a contract pending fulfillment. You look at the faces in the crowd, the calculating eyes of your new father-in-law, the sharp, appraising glances of the court ladies. They are all investors, waiting to see if their acquisition will pay off. You are the jewel of the deal, and soon you will be placed in the crown. But first, you must be inspected to ensure you are not flawed, and that inspection will not be private. The moment you and your new betrothed are standing together, the air in the castle changes. A low, persistent hum of conversation rises from every corner. A sound like 1,000 bees buzzing over a field of wildflowers. This isn't the polite, deferential chatter of a normal courtly day. This is different. It's sharper, more focused. It's the sound of speculation. You are now the central characters in a play that everyone has been waiting to see, and they are all reading the script ahead of time, whispering about the final act, as you are laid to the high table for a pre-wedding meal, or perhaps are just standing in the great hall making excruciatingly formal small talk. You can feel the gossip radiating outwards from you in waves. You don't need to hear the exact words to know what they're saying. You can see it in the way the ladies in waiting huddle together, their silk-covered heads bent close, their fans fluttering to hide their smirks. They are assessing you, dissecting every detail. Is your complexion pale enough to suggest a delicate, virginal nature? Is your posture straight? Your gaze demure? They look from you to your intended, a subtle back and forth, as if measuring the space between you. They are making bets. You're certain of it. Bets on your fertility, on his potency, on whether the night will be a success. It feels as though your very body has become a topic of public discourse. The men are just as bad, though perhaps a little less subtle. They gather in clumps, their laughter a touch too loud, their jokes punctuated with hearty slaps on the back. They look at your husband to be with a mixture of envy and a kind of boisterous, comrade like pity. They offer him advice, couched in crude jokes and winks. They are reminding him of his duty, framing it not as an intimate act, but as a public performance, a test of his manhood that will be graded by everyone in this room. He must feel the pressure as keenly as you do. A different kind of weight, but just as heavy. This intense, invasive scrutiny was a fundamental part of the noble experience. Privacy, as you might think of it, simply didn't exist for people of your class. Your life was state business. A common farmer might marry his sweetheart in a village church with only a few neighbors as witnesses. But your union is a matter of national security, the stability of the kingdom, the prevention of civil war, the continuation of a royal line. It all rests on this marriage producing a legitimate heir. And legitimacy, in this world, requires witnesses. Everyone here, from the highest duke to the lowliest page, sees themselves as a stakeholder, a guarantor of the process. They are not just being nosy. In their minds, they are performing a vital political function. And here's a peculiar little detail about courtly life. The architecture itself was often designed to eliminate privacy. In many castles, rooms didn't connect via long, separate hallways. Instead, you had to walk through one person's chamber to get to the next in a long, continuous suite. The king's own bedchamber was often a semi-public space, a place where he would receive advices and conduct business, sometimes while still in his nightshirt. The idea of a locked door and a quiet moment alone was a luxury few could afford, and for a royal couple, it was practically unthinkable. Your life was designed to be observed. As the day wears on, the whispers become more specific. You overhear a fragment of conversation as you pass a window alcove, something about the importance of drinking spiced wine tonight, a known aphrodisiac. Someone else mentions a particular saint to pray to for fertility. It's a relentless barrage of unsolicited advice in public commentary. They talk about the consummation of your marriage with the same casual, practical tone they might use to discuss the breeding of a prized falcon. It is a thing that must be done, and done correctly, for the good of the estate. The question of why this had to be so public, so ritualized, is something historians still puzzle over. Was it purely a legal precaution, a way to ensure there could be no future doubt about the marriage's validity and the heir's legitimacy? Or was it something deeper, a remnant of older, pre-Christian fertility rites, a folk tradition that clung on even in the most sophisticated courts? The answer is likely a messy combination of both. It was law, it was tradition, and it was a form of mass entertainment all rolled into one uncomfortable package. So now, you just have to endure it. You must hold your head high, maintain a serene, pleasant expression, and pretend you can't hear them. You and the stranger beside you are two actors on a stage, surrounded by an audience that is also, strangely, part of the cast. They are both spectators and participants, and the closer the sun gets to setting, the more you realize that when the time comes for you to go to your bedchamber, you will not be going alone. The entire audience is planning on coming with you. The day of the wedding arrives, a flurry of controlled chaos. You are woken before dawn by an army of attendants, their arms laden with silks, velvets, and linens. The air in your chamber is cold, but it's soon filled with the warm, anxious energy of women on a mission. Today, they are not just dressing you, they are constructing a symbol. The centerpiece of this construction is, of course, the gown. It's laid out on a long chest, a shimmering lake of fabric that seems to absorb all the candlelight in the room. This is no simple white dress. The tradition of a purely white wedding gown for brides is a much later invention, popularized by Queen Victoria in the 19th century. Your dress is a riot of color, a testament to your family's wealth. It's a deep, vibrant blue, the dye so expensive it's said to be worth more than its weight in gold. Or perhaps it's a crimson reed, a color of passion and power. The exact color was less important than its richness and rarity. The process of getting into it is a feat of engineering. First comes the chemise, a simple, fine-lidded garment. Then the layers begin. A corset, not necessarily as punishing as the ones from later centuries, but stiff enough, reinforced with wood bone, to give you the desired upright, noble posture. Its waist-tight, a constant reminder of the day's formality. Then comes the kirtler, a fitted undergown. And finally, the gown itself. The fabric is impossibly heavy. It's a thick brocade, woven with real gold and silver thread that catches the light with every tiny movement. The sleeves are long and dramatic, lined with ermine or fox fur, even if the season doesn't call for it. The fur isn't for warmth. It's a walking billboard for your family's status. It claims, we can afford to wear the pelts of dozens of tiny, expensive animals just for decoration. Every inch of the garment is a calculated display of power. As your ladies pull and smooth the fabric, you feel less like you're getting dressed and more like you're being armed. The gown is your armor for the day. Its weight is grounding. Its structure a kind of external skeleton holding you upright when your knees feel weak. Its sheer magnificence is a shield, deflecting the speculative gazes of the court, forcing them to look at the symbol rather than the trembling girl inside it. One of the most curious and debated aspects of medieval bridal wear is the hair. For an unmarried noblewoman, it was often worn long and loose, a sign of her virginity and availability. But on your wedding day, you are transitioning. Historical accounts and artistic depictions vary wildly. Would your hair be down for the ceremony, a final display of your maiden status, only to be elaborately pinned up afterwards? Or would it be intricately braided and coiled from the start, perhaps hidden beneath a veil or a jeweled headdress, signaling your new status as a married woman? It's one of those details that likely change dramatically depending on the specific region and decade. A fashion puzzle that historians are still trying to piece together from manuscript illuminations and vague descriptions in letters. Then come the jewels. A heavy necklace is fastened around your throat. Its stones cold against your skin. Rings are slipped onto your fingers. A girdle, a decorative belt of linked gold plates, is cinched around your hips. It's from this girdle that your prayer book and perhaps a pommel to raise small metal ball filled with fragrant herbs to ward off bad smells and disease would hang. You are being loaded with treasure, every piece a part of your dowry made visible. A preview of the wealth you bring. Here's a detail you might not expect. Your shoes would be surprisingly delicate. Not heavy boots, but soft slippers made of silk or fine leather, often embroidered to match the gown. They aren't practical. They aren't meant for walking long distances. They are the footwear of someone who is carried or who glides across polished castle floors. A subtle but clear indicator of a life lived far from the mud and toil of the common world. Finally, you are ready. You are led to a long silver mirror, a rare and precious object. Its surface slightly wavy and dark, giving your reflection a dreamlike quality. The woman staring back at you is someone you barely recognize. She is a queen, a duchess, a work of art. Her face, your face, is a small, pale island in a sea of opulent fabric and glittering gems. She looks serene, powerful, and ready. It is the greatest performance of your life, and your costume is perfect. You just have to hope the actress can remember her lines and her blocking without stumbling. You take a slow, shallow breath, constrained by the corset. The gown feels like a beautiful, expensive cage. It is time to go to the church. The walk to the chapel is a slow, deliberate performance. The stone corridor is lined with courtiers, their faces a blur of polite smiles and craned necks. The sound of your heavy gown whispering against the floor is the only thing you can hear over the pounding in your ears. Your father's hand is a firm, possessive weight on your arm, guiding you forward. He isn't just your father today. He is the custodian of a precious asset, about to formally transfer ownership. You reach the heavy oak doors of the chapel. In a fascinating twist of medieval custom, the most legally binding part of the wedding ceremony often didn't happen inside the church at all. It took place right here, on the church porch, a space known as the ecclesia, before the face of the church. This was a holdover from older, Pre-Christian traditions. A public declaration made at the threshold between the secular world and the sacred one. It was here, in the open air, for all to see, that the core of the contract was enacted. The priest stands before you, his vestments rich and imposing. Your intended is waiting, looking just as stiff and magnificently uncomfortable as you feel in his own finery. This is where the practical matters were dealt with. Your father would publicly declare the details of your dowry. Your future husband would, in turn, publicly announce the dower, the lands and income he was setting aside for you. The mourning gift. It was a public accounting. A final verification of the terms of the deal before God and everyone else were called to witness it. Then comes the central question. The priest asks your groom, in formal Latin or the local vernacular, if he takes you as his wife. He responds with the time-honored formula. Then, all eyes turn to you. Do you take this man to be your husband? The silence that follows this question is the most profound you have ever experienced. This is your one, tiny, legally mandated moment of agency, as we discussed. The pressure to say yes is astronomical. To say no at this stage would be a cataclysmic scandal. Yet, the question must be asked. It is the linchpin of the whole sacrament. Scholars still debate how often a bride or groom actually refused at this point. While rare, there are scattered accounts of last-minute rebellions at the church door, acts of incredible bravery or desperation that would have sent shockwaves through the entire social order. You, however, say yes. Your voice is a small, thin sound in the vastness of the courtyard. With the public vows exchanged, a ring is produced. Not a simple gold band, but likely a heavy, ornate thing, possibly set with a single, significant gemstone. The groom slides it onto your finger. But which finger? The modern tradition of the fourth finger of the left hand wasn't universal. In some places, it was the right hand. And a particularly charming bit of lore, though its historical accuracy is shaky, is the idea that the ring was tried on the thumb, index, and middle finger first, with the groom reciting in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit for each one, before finally placing it on the fourth finger with an amen. It turned the gesture into a small, holy ritual. Now with the legalities and the vows completed outside, you finally move through the doors into the church itself. The air inside is cooling smells of old stone, incense, and melting beeswax. Light, tinted jewel tone by the stained glass windows, falls in patches on the floor. The space is vast and decorating. You are led to the altar for the nuptial mass. This part of the ceremony is less about you and more about God. It's a long service, filled with prayers, chants, and scripture readings, all in Latin. You kneel on hard cushions, your back aching from the weight of your gown and the rigid posture demanded by your corset. The service is a powerful reinforcement of the religious meaning of marriage, its permanence, its sacredness, its purpose for procreation. The priest's sermon will likely emphasize your wifely duties, obedience, loyalty, and, above all, the bearing of children. It is a very public and very holy job description. One of the most symbolic moments during the Mass was the sharing of the Eucharist. As a married couple, you would now receive communion together, a sign of your new, unified spiritual life. Sometimes, you would also drink from a shared cup of wine, another potent symbol of the life you would now share. As you kneel there, with the priest's voice droning on, your mind might wander. You look at the man kneeling beside you. You've now spoken sacred, unbreakable vows to him. You are bound together in the eyes of the Lord, the eyes of God. It's a moment of profound, terrifying finality. There is no turning back. The public performance at the church door gave way to a sacred performance at the altar. But you know, with a growing knot of dread in your stomach, that the day's performances are far from over. The most public and most personal is yet to come. Once the final amen has echoed through the stone vaults of the chapel, you might think you did get a moment to breathe, a quiet minute to process the fact that you are now, irrevocably, a wife, You would be wrong. The moment you step back out into the daylight, the next phase of the public spectacle begins immediately: the wedding feast. This is no simple dinner. This is a marathon of eating, drinking, and being watched, designed to last for hours, sometimes even days. You are led from the church to the castle's great hall, the same place you first met your now husband, but it has been transformed. The walls are hung with rich tapestries depicting heroic hunts or biblical scenes. The floors are strewn with fresh rushes and sweet-smelling herbs. A medieval attempt at air freshening that only partially succeeds against the aroma of hundreds of bodies, roasting meat, and spilled wine. You and your husband are seated at the high table, a long trestle on a raised platform at one end of the hall. This isn't just for a better view. It's to elevate you, to separate you from the lesser nobility and guests who fill the long tables stretching down the length of the hall. You are on display, the living centerpiece of the entire event. Every eye is on you. The sheer amount of food is staggering. It's a culinary shock and awe campaign, designed to showcase the host family's immense wealth and power. Course after course emerges from the kitchens, a parade of culinary extravagance. There isn't a single main course. There are dozens. You'll see whole roasted swans, their feathers painstakingly reattached after cooking to make them look alive. Peacocks, skinned and roasted, then sewn back into their iridescent plumage. Giant pies, called subtleties, from which live birds might fly out when the crust is cut. There are jellies molded into the shape of castles, and mountains of glistening, candied fruits. Here's a bizarre and slightly unsettling detail of the medieval feast: the food was often a form of entertainment and political commentary. A cook might create a dish representing the sides of the two united houses: a lion made of roasted pork facing a stag made of spiced bread, for instance. But these subtleties could also be satirical. A cook might craft a scene of a fox dressed as a priest, a subtle dig at a rival family or a corrupt local bishop. The food wasn't just for eating, it was for reading. As the bride and groom, you are expected to eat, or at least to appear to be eating, but it's almost impossible. Your corset is of ice, your nerves are a tangled knot, and you know that every bite you take is being scrutinized. Does she have a healthy appetite? A good sign for her ability to carry a healthy child. Does she look pale? Perhaps she is too frail. You push a piece of gilded gingerbread around your silver plate, trying to look engaged and happy. The wine flows like water. Huge barrels are rolled into the hole, and servants with pitchers constantly circle the tables, refilling goblets. The mood, which started as formally celebratory, begins to loosen, to grow louder and more boisterous as the afternoon wears on. The music, which at first was provided by refined players on lutes and recorders, is now bolstered by the brescia sound of horns and drums. And all the while, you must sit there, next to this man who is now your husband. You must smile. You must engage in light conversation. A seemingly impossible task when you have nothing to talk about but the terrifying event looming at the end of the night. You might ask him about his favorite horse. He might ask you about your needlepoint. It is the most awkward small talk in history, conducted with an audience of hundreds. Historians often debate the true purpose of such extreme feasting. Was it pure conspicuous consumption, a medieval potlatch designed to cement social status, or did it serve a more practical, political purpose, creating a sense of shared goodwill and obligation among the guests who partook in the host's generosity? The answer, as always, is probably both. By feeding his allies and vassals so lavishly, your father or father-in-law was reinforcing the bonds of loyalty, reminding everyone of his power and their dependence on him. This feast wasn't a party. It was a political rally with much better food. For you, it is simply an ordeal. The hours stretch on, marked by the arrival of yet another roasted animal. The faces of the guests begin to blur into a sea of flushed cheeks and glassy eyes. The dread that has been a small, cold stone in your stomach all day begins to expand. You know what this is all leading up to. The feast is just the overture. and as the sun begins to set outside the high-arched windows, you know the curtain is about to rise on the main event. As the afternoon bleeds into evening, the character of the feast undergoes a distinct transformation. The light in the great hall becomes thickened orange, cast from scores of torches and candles that throw dancing, exaggerated shadows against the tapestries. The air, already heavy with the smells of food and wine, now carries the acrid tang of smoke. The polite, courtly music has been replaced by something more raucous, played by minstrels with flushed faces and a taste for bawdy lyrics. The decorum of the early celebration begins to fray at the edges, deliberately unsystematically. It starts subtly. A few of the lords, their tongues loosened by wine, begin to make toasts that are less about your family's honor and more about the duties of the wedding night. The jokes are veiled at first, couched in clever metaphors about tilling fertile fields or finding a safe harbor. You are expected to blush demurely, while your husband is meant to take it with a stoic, manly grin. It's the beginning of a slow, creeping invasion of your personal space, a verbal undressing that precedes the literal one. Then, the minstrels and traveling performers, who had been playing background music, take center stage. Their songs are no longer tales of chivalrous knights and distant, unattainable ladies. They are now fabliaux short, comical, and often shockingly crude narrative poems and songs. The plots are always the same: lusty wives, foolish old husbands, and clever young men. The lyrics are filled with double entendres and outright vulgarities, all celebrating the physical act of love in the most graphic, least romantic way imaginable. Imagine sitting on your elevated days, a symbol of purity and nobility, while a singer below recounts in gleeful detail the amorous adventures of a dairymaid and a stable boy. The crowd roars with laughter. They bang their fists on the tables, splashing wine from their cups. They are not laughing at the song. They are laughing with it. At you. The performance is a deliberate breaking of taboo, a way of officially shifting the mood from the sacred business of the church to the very profane business of the bedchamber. This part of the celebration could get incredibly wild, and it's here that we find some of the most bizarre wedding customs. In some parts of Europe, a game would be played where the male guests would try to steal the bride's garter. This wasn't a gentle, modern toss. It was a chaotic free-for-all where men would literally accost the bride at the feast table, trying to pull the garter from her leg as a good luck token. It was seen as a prize that would bring them luck in their own romantic endeavors. This is, by the way, the likely ancestor of the modern garter toss, a sanitized ghost of a much more aggressive and invasive ritual. The food, too, might take on a more suggestive theme. Cooks would create desserts and sweetmeats in deliberately phallic or yoni C-shapes, spices known for their supposed aphrodisiac qualities: nutmeg, ginger. Cloves would be used in abundance in the final courses. Everything is now geared toward one single, inevitable conclusion. The entire celebration is funneling down to a single point in time and space: your wedding bed. Why this obsession with public ribaldry? Historians have a few theories, and they aren't mutually exclusive. One idea is that it served as a form of social release valve. In a society that was, on the surface, intensely repressed and governed by strict religious codes of conduct, the wedding feast was a sanctioned space for Konovalowski chaos. It was a moment to talk openly about the things that were normally whispered, a way to acknowledge the earthy, biological reality that underpinned the stately political alliance. Another theory, and one that academic circles are still exploring, is that it functioned as a kind of folk magic, a ritual to encourage fertility, by singing loud, lewd songs and telling bawdy jokes. The community was creating an atmosphere of rampant, positive virility. They were, in their own way, trying to magically bless the union with the power of their collective, uninhibited energy. It was a fertility rite disguised as a drunken party. For you, sitting on that high-backed chair, the experience is one of profound alienation. The celebration is supposedly in your honor, yet it feels entirely out of your control. You're an object, a symbol being passed from the sacred custody of the church to the profane, communal energy of the feast. You exchange a glance with your husband. Is he enjoying this? Is this raucous smile bonding a comfort to him? Or is his smile as strained and artificial as yours? You can't tell. He is still a stranger, and you are both trapped in the same bizarre, noisy, and increasingly uncomfortable play. You just wish they would get on with it, that the final scene would arrive. However terrifying it might be, at least it would be the end. As the feast reaches its chaotic, wine-soaked crescendo, a new figure enters the great hall, and his arrival signals the beginning of the end. It's the priest. The same man who, hours earlier, had presided over the solemn, sacred vows at the altar, now navigates his way through the boisterous, drunken crowd. He is not here to quell the revelry. In fact, he is here to officiate its final, most intimate stage. His destination is not the high table where you sit, but the bedchamber. This might seem like a shocking breach of clerical duty to a modern man of God participating in the raunchy prelude to a consummation, but in the medieval worldview, this made perfect sense. The marriage bed, Thelmis, was not just a piece of furniture. It was the altar upon which the sacrament of marriage was to be physically completed. The union was not considered truly sealed, truly unbreakable, until it was consummated. Therefore, the bed itself had to be sanctified, cleansed of any evil spirits or bad omens that might interfere with the crucial task of producing an heir. So a small, select procession forms. It includes the priest, your parents, your husband's parents, and perhaps a few of the highest-ranking nobles. They leave the noise of the great hall behind and proceed to the chamber that has been prepared for you. While they are gone, you and your husband are left at the high table, the subjects of even more intense focus staring from the remaining guests. The anticipation in the room is now a palpable thing, a thick, heavy blanket of expectation. You can picture the scene in the bedchamber. It is the most luxurious room in the castle, dominated by a massive reposter bed. This bed is a status symbol in itself. It is huge, carved from oak, heavy oak, and hung with thick curtains of velvet or brocade, lined with silk. The mattress is not straw, but stuffed thick with soft goose feathers. The sheets are of the finest linen, smelling faintly of lavender from being stored in a chest with dried herbs. The priest begins the ritual. He walks around the bed, sprinkling it with holy water from as small as perso root, the drops glistening on the rich fabrics in the candlelight. He murmurs prayers and blessings in Latin, the words ancient and powerful. The prayers are not for your happiness or for a long and loving life together. They are specific, targeted, and deeply pragmatic. He is blessing the bed for fertility. He is praying for the conception of a male heir. He is asking God to make this a fruitful and productive union, in the most literal, agricultural sense of the word. This practice of blessing the bed is ancient, and its exact form is something historians still piece together from liturgical texts and church records. Some scholars argue it was a purely Christian rite, a way for the church to extend its authority from the public space of the sanctuary into the most private space of the home. Others suggest it was a clever Christianization of a much older, pagan tradition. In many pre-Christian cultures, the marriage bed was a site of powerful magic, and rituals were performed to ward off evil and ensure the couple's fertility. The church, unable to stamp out these deep-rooted folk beliefs, simply absorbed them, replacing the pagan chants with Latin prayers and the folk healer with a priest. There's a fascinating, and slightly comical, detail found in some of these liturgical instructions. They often included prayers against impotence, specifically impotence caused by witchcraft. There was a genuine belief that a jealous rival or a malevolent sorcerer could place a curse, known as a malefic IUM, upon the groom, rendering him unable to perform his marital duty. The priest's blessing was therefore also a form of spiritual defense, an exorcism of any potential magical interference. The pressure on your husband, it turns out, was not just social and political, it was supernatural, too. Back in the Great Hall, you can almost feel the vibrations of the priest's chant through the stone floors. The blessing of the bed is a clear signal to everyone. The time is near. The formal rituals are drawing to a close. The songs get a little louder. The jokes a little cruder. The crowd is working itself into a final frenzy before the main event. When the small party returns from the bedchamber, their faces are solemn, as if returning from a sacred mission. Your father-in-law might give your husband a firm, encouraging nod. Your mother might give your hand a quick, cold squeeze. The priest has done his part. The bed is now a consecrated space, ready for its purpose. All it needs now are the occupants, and the entire court is about to make sure you get there. The return of the bed blessing party is the signal everyone has been waiting for. A ripple of movement, a collective shifting of weight, goes through the great hall. The minstrels strike up a new tune, something loud and processional, a fanfare for the final journey of the night. It's time. There's no more stalling, no more polite conversation to be made. The great procession is about to begin. This isn't a quiet, dignified exit. It's the opposite. The goal is to make as much noise and commotion as possible. The tradition, rooted in ancient folk customs, was that loud noises, shouting, banging pots and pans, celebratory music drove away evil spirits. On your wedding night, these spirits were thought to be particularly meddlesome, eager to spoil the union with infertility or discord. So your departure from the feast is accompanied by a deliberate, joyful cacophony. Suddenly, you are surrounded. The highest-ranking nobles and your closest family members have the honor of escorting you. Your father takes one of your arms, your new father-in-law the other. Your husband is similarly flanked by his own male relatives. Behind you, a great crowd of guests falls into line, a jostling, laughing, tipsy entourage. They hold flickering torches and candles, turning the procession into a river of moving light that snakes its way out of the great hall. You are swept along in this current of humanity. Your feet barely seem to touch the ground. The corridor, which felt so long and solemn when you walked to the chapel this morning, is now a tunnel of noise and leering, happy faces. People shout blessings that sound more like taunts. Make a strong son. Don't disappoint the king. The jokes are cruder now, with no pretense of metaphor. They are direct, anatomical, and deeply personal. You feel your cheeks burning, but you have to keep smiling, to pretend you are a willing and happy participant in your own ritual humiliation. This procession was a critical, non-negotiable part of the proceedings for the nobility. It served a vital legal and social function. It was the act of witnessing. Everyone in this parade, from the Duke holding a candelabra to the page boy tripping over his own feet at the back, was becoming a witness to the fact that you, the bride and groom, were being formally delivered to the marriage bed. Their presence was a public testimony. It quashed any future rumor that the marriage wasn't put to bed properly. It made the consummation a communal event, a matter of public record, even before it had happened. One of the strangest elements of this procession, mentioned in various accounts, is the presence of musicians who would walk with you, playing their lutes, pipes, and drums all the way to the bedchamber door, and often, right on inside. Imagine trying to prepare for the most nerve-wracking night of your life with a small, boisterous band playing just a few feet away. It transforms the moment from one of intimacy to one of pure theater. Historians still debate the precise atmosphere of these processions. Were they genuinely joyful, a good-natured, if rowdy, communal celebration of a happy event? Or was there a darker, more menacing undertone, a form of social control? A reminder to the young couple of their public duty and the consequences of failure. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle and varied greatly from one wedding to the next. For some, it may have been a drunken good time. For you, in this moment, it feels like being led to your execution, albeit an execution where everyone is laughing and singing. You finally reach the door to the bedchamber. The same door the priest had entered a short while ago. It stands open. The room beyond glowing with the warm light of a dozen candles and a roaring fire in the hearth. The procession doesn't stop at the threshold. That would be far too private, far too discreet. Instead, the river of people flows directly from the hallway into the chamber, filling it instantly. The noise, which was diffused in the long corridor, is now contained, amplified by the stone walls, becoming an overwhelming roar of voices, music, and laughter. You had arrived, and so has everyone else. You step across the threshold, and the reality of the situation hits you with the force of a physical blow. This room, which should be the most private and intimate space in your new life, is the most crowded place in the entire castle. The procession is poured into the chamber, filling every available inch of space. Lords and ladies, aunts and uncles, cousins you barely know, and courtiers whose names you've already forgotten, they are all here. Pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces flushed with wine and excitement. The air is hot and close, thick with the smell of candle wax, sweat, unwashed bodies, and the cloying scent of the herbs still smouldering in the fireplace. The small band of musicians has found a corner and continues to play, their jaunty tunes a surreal soundtrack to your mounting anxiety. It feels like a dream, a bizarre, claustrophobic nightmare where the walls of your own bedroom are made of people. They are all looking at you and your husband, who stands awkwardly beside you, but most of all, they are looking at the bed. It dominates the room, a shrewd, ornate stage for the drama that is about to unfold. Its curtains, which you had imagined as a veil of privacy, are tied back, exposing the perfectly smooth, pristine white linen sheets. The bed, consecrated by the priest, is now being gawked at by the laity. It is the focal point of 100 pairs of eyes. This ritual of the public bedchamber was not just for royalty. It was common practice among the high nobility across Europe for centuries. The logic behind it was brutally simple. A marriage, especially one involving property and titles, was a public contract. The final step of that contract, the consummation, therefore required public witnesses, not witnesses to the act itself, necessarily, but witnesses to the couple being placed in the bed together, a symbolic act that was legally almost as important. Their presence confirmed that the opportunity for consummation had been officially provided. You look around the room, trying to find a friendly face, a single gaze that offers sympathy rather than prurient curiosity. You might catch your mother's eye, but her expression is a tight, unreadable mask of duty. You see your ladies in waiting, the same girls you shared secrets with for years. But tonight they are just part of the crowd, their faces glowing with a mixture of vicarious excitement and relief that it isn't them. Here is a particularly strange detail about the layout of these state bed chambers. In some grand palaces, they were designed with small, hidden viewing galleries or peepholes. These weren't necessarily for the bedding ceremony itself, but they speak to the profound lack of privacy afforded to high-ranking individuals. The idea was that the monarch's life was never truly his own, and he might need to be observed, even in his most private moments, for his own safety or for reasons of state. While it's debated how often these were used during a wedding night, their very existence reinforces the idea that the walls literally had eyes. The question of who was allowed in the room is a matter of intense historical discussion. Was it truly a free-for-all, or was there a strict protocol based on rank? The evidence suggests it was the latter. The most powerful and highest-ranking individuals, dukes, earls, close royal relatives, would be closest to the bed. They were the official witnesses. Lesser nobles and courtiers would have crowded in behind them, with the lowest-ranking people probably stuck in the doorway, craning their necks for a glimpse. Your humiliation was, in itself, a carefully structured and hierarchical affair. For now, you just stand there, a statue in a silk gown. As the room buzzes around you, the noise is a physical pressure. You feel utterly completely exposed, your personal identity dissolving into your public function. You are no longer a person. You are the bride. He is the groom. You are two ceremonial objects being positioned for the final part of the ritual. The time for talking is over. The time for performance has begun. A few of the senior ladies of the court step forward, their expressions a mixture of matronly authority and undisguised glee, simultaneously. A group of the groom's closest male friends and relatives approaches him. A new phase is about to start. The crowd pushes in a little closer, a collective intake of breath. The room is crowded with eyes, and soon it will be crowded with hands. The moment has arrived. The room, already uncomfortably crowded, seems to shrink as the distinct groups converge on you and your husband. Your ladies in waiting, led by the highest-ranking woman in the room, perhaps your mother, or the queen herself, approach you with a rustle of silk skirts. At the same time, your husband is surrounded by a boisterous pack of his male relatives and companions, led by his father or the king. The public undressing is about to begin. This is not a gentle, private disrobing. It is a swift, public, and highly symbolic act. Your ladies begin to work on the complex architecture of your wedding gown. The hems, a flurry of practiced efficiency, move over the laces, hooks, and pins that have held you together all day. The heavy outer gown is lifted over your head, and for a moment you are submerged in a sea of dark, expensive velvet. When you emerge, it feels as if a layer of armor has been stripped away. You are left in your finer, simpler undergown, or kirtler. The men across the room are doing the same to your husband. His heavy doublet, his formal hose, his ceremonial robes are all removed with a series of hearty jokes and slaps on the back. This isn't just about getting him ready for bed. It's a ritual of male bonding. A final, physical reminder of his duty. They are stripping him of his public finery to reveal the man who must now perform a vital private act, albeit in an excruciatingly public setting. Back on your side of the room, the process continues. Your jeweled girdle is unclasped. The rings are slipped from your fingers. The headdress is carefully lifted from your hair, which might be unpinned and allowed to cascade down your back. A final, symbolic display of the virginity that is about to be relinquished. The atmosphere is strangely bifurcated on your side. It's a flurry of quiet, almost reverent female activity. On his side, it's loud, raucous, and fueled by wine-soaked bravado. Now you are down to your final layer of clothing, the chemise, a simple, long linen shift. It's the most intimate garment you own, and you are wearing it in a room full of people. This is the moment of ultimate vulnerability. The symbolic armor is gone. You are just a young woman, standing in your underwear in front of a crowd of strangers and family, about to get into bed with a man you barely know. One of the most debated aspects of this ritual is how far the public undressing actually went. Did they truly strip the couple completely naked in front of the entire court? The historical record is, perhaps mercifully, a little ambiguous here. Most accounts suggest they were left in their shifts or nightshirts. To be completely nude would have been a step too far even for the less privacy-obsessed medieval mind. The shift provided a thin, symbolic veil of modesty. However, what constituted a nightshirt for a king could be an incredibly lavish garment, made of the finest silk and embroidered with gold thread. It was another opportunity for a subtle display of wealth, even at the point of reenactances. Here's a fashionably bizarre tidbit from a royal French wedding. It was considered a great honor for the highest-ranking nobleman present to hand the groom his nightshirt. Imagine the scene: the King of France, standing there in his underthings, while his most powerful dukes solemnly presents him with his pajamas. Every single step of this process was freighted with social and political meaning. Once you are both in your night clothes, you are ceremonial lead the final few steps to the huge, waiting bed. The crowd parts just enough to let you pass. The linen sheets feel impossibly cool against your skin as you sit on the edge of the mattress. Your husband is guided to the other side. You are now seated in the bed, propped up against a mountain of goose feather pillows. The entire court gathered around you like spectators in a surgical theater. The performance is not over. In fact, one of its strangest and most chaotic scenes is about to erupt. You are now sitting in the bed, propped up against a mountain of pillows, clad only in your fine linen shift. Your new husband is beside you, equally exposed. The heat in the room is intense. A combination of the roaring fireplace, the press of human bodies, and your own mortification. The musicians are still playing their relentless, cheerful tunes. You might think that this is the peak of the awkwardness, the absolute summit of public humiliation. You would be wrong. Because now, the game begins. Suddenly, there's a surge of movement from the younger, more boisterous guests crowded around the foot of the bed. A chaotic, almost violent energy ripples through the room. Their target is your feet, or more specifically, your stockings. This is a ritual known as flinging the stocking, a bizarre, deeply invasive tradition that was popular for centuries. The goal was for the groomsmen to forcibly remove the groom's stockings, while the bridesmaids did the same to you. It wasn't a polite request. It was a playful, drunken assault. A tangled mess of hands grabbing at your legs while you're sitting in your wedding bed. Once a stocking was successfully captured, the real game began. The groomsmen would line up at the foot of the bed, turn their backs to you, and, one by one, toss the groom's stocking over their shoulder, trying to land it on your head. Then the bridesmaids would do the same, flinging your stocking at your husband's head. The belief was that the first person to successfully land the stocking on the correct target would be the next to marry. It was a form of fortune-telling, a raucous, messy, and deeply personal divination ritual. The whole room would erupt in cheers and jeers with each throw. A near miss would elicit a collective groan. A direct hit would be met with a roar of triumph, and the successful thrower would be celebrated as if they had just won a jousting tournament. Imagine the scene. You are trying to maintain some shred of dignity, and you are being pelted with your new husband's sweaty, discarded hosiery, thrown by his drunkest friends. It's a moment of pure, undiluted chaos, a complete breakdown of the formal, stately proceedings of the day. All the carefully constructed layers of decorum are stripped away, leaving behind this raw, almost primal bit of folk tradition. The historical origins of this practice are murky, which is something scholars in the field of folklore and social history continue to investigate. Is it a symbolic stealing of the couple's fertility and good luck? Is it a way of ritually participating in the consummation, of touching something intimately connected to the couple at this liminal moment? Or is it just an excuse for drunken foolishness? A sanctioned moment of misrule before the serious business begins. Like so many of these traditions, it's likely a tangled knot of all three. There were, of course, regional variations. In some places, it was just the stockings. In others, other items of clothing might be fair game. But the stocking toss seems to have been the most widespread and enduring version of the custom. It survived for an astonishingly long time, well into the 17th and 18th centuries, long after other parts of the public bedding ceremony had started to fade away. While this is happening, you are not just a passive target. You are expected to play along, to smile, to laugh, to pretend that being used for target practice in your own bed is the most amusing thing in the world. Any sign of displeasure or fear would be seen as poor sportsmanship, a bad omen for the marriage itself. You and your husband exchange a fleeting glance, perhaps, in the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the moment. You find a tiny, shared flicker of connection. You are in this together, the two calmest, most terrified people in a room that has descended into a bizarre, ritualized pillow fight, but with stockings. Eventually, a winner is declared. The game subsides. The stockings, now treasures, are claimed, and the crowd's energy shifts once more. The chaotic, playful part of the evening is over. The air grows a little quieter, the mood turning from rowdy to expectant. The games are finished. The final stage of the public ritual is about to be set. The chaotic energy of the stocking toss finally subsides, leaving a ringing in your ears and a faint, lingering sense of the absurd. The guests, their game concluded, seem to collectively sober up for a moment, remembering the true purpose of their gathering. The musicians soften their tune, shifting from a boisterous jig to something a little more placid. A new, more solemn phase of the ritual is beginning. Servants appear, pushing their way through the throng of onlookers. They carry a large, ornate silver tray. On it are 2 steaming goblets and a silver bowl filled with a thick, fragrant liquid. This is the pos set, the traditional line tight of the bedding ceremony. And like everything else tonight, it is not a private, intimate drink, but a communal, symbolic one. Pos set was a popular drink in medieval and early modern Europe. A sort of rich, curdled concoction that sounds slightly horrifying to the modern palate. It was made by mixing hot milk with wine or ale, which would cause the milk to curdle. This mixture was then heavily sweetened with sugar, a luxury item, and spiced with expensive, exotic spices like nutmeg, cinnamon, and ginger. The result was a warm, thick, and incredibly potent brew, with a layer of creamy curds floating over a hot, alcoholic whey. It was part dessert, part medicine, and part ceremonial potion. The specific spices used were not chosen at random. They were the very same ingredients believed to be powerful aphrodisiacs, the same ones that flavored the final courses of the feast. This drink was a final, concentrated dose of fertility-boosting, passion-inducing magic. It was a practical tool, meant to fortify the couple for the labors ahead. It was a last-ditch effort to ensure the groom had the necessary vigor and the bride the necessary receptiveness for the task at hand. You are handed one of the heavy goblets. It's warm in your hands. The smell is sweet and heady, the wine and spices mingling in the steam. You are expected to drink it. All of it, in front of everyone. Your new husband is handed the other goblet. You must drink together. Another performance of your new unity. You raise the cup to your lips. The gazes of 100 people following the movement. The liquid is thick, almost a porridge, and burns slightly as it goes down. Its cloying lies sweet, and the alcoholic kick is immediate and surprisingly strong. This ritual of the shared cup is ancient, and it has parallels all over the world. It's a powerful symbol of a shared life, of partaking in the same nourishment and fortune. But here, in this context, it has a much more specific, more pressing meaning. It is a toast not just to your future, but to your immediate future, to the next few hours. The exact recipe for a wedding pos set is a fascinating little corner of culinary history, with academics debating the specific ingredients and their symbolic meanings. Was the choice of sake type of sherry over claret significant? Did the inclusion of ambergris in a royal pos set have a specific magical purpose? Or was it just another display of obscene wealth? These are the kinds of details that food historians can spend years unpacking from old household account books and royal kitchen records. As you lower your empty goblet, a servant might offer you a small, sweet cake or a piece of spiced bread, meant to be dipped in the remaining pos set in the central bowl. This act of dipping and sharing food was another layer of the same symbolism. It was intimate, communal, and deeply ceremonial. There is a strange, almost medical feeling to this part of the evening. You are being administered a prescription, a dose of folk medicine to ensure a desired outcome. It underscores, once again, how little this event is about romance and how much it is about biology. The court is not just hoping for the best. They are actively intervening, using every tool at their disposal: prayer, magic, and now this spiced, curdled potion to bring about the result the kingdom requires. With the pos set finished, a new finality settles over the room. The last of the ritual props has been used. The final symbolic act before the final act has been completed. There is nothing left to do. The crowd seems to hold a collective breath. The time has come to finally, mercifully, be left alone, or at least, something that vaguely resembles it. The empty pos set goblets are wished away by silent servants, and their departure creates a vacuum in the room. The loud, boisterous energy of the stocking toss and the solemn, focused energy of the shared drink are both gone. What remains is a thick, heavy silence, a silence of pure, unadulterated expectation. The final public ritual is at hand. From the crowd of onlookers, a very small, very elite group detaches itself. It is the two sets of parents and the highest ranking person in the room, perhaps the king himself, or a visiting archbishop. These are the people with the ultimate authority, the final guarantors of the union. They move towards the bed not with the rowdy energy of the other guests, but with a slow, deliberate gravity, as if approaching an altar. This is their final, and greatest, honor of the night, the privilege of officially putting you to bed. It's the most powerful, most intimidating babysitting service in history. They arrange themselves on either side of the massive bed. Your mother and the queen might stand on your side. Your father and the king on your husband's. They don't speak. They simply reach down and take hold of the edge of the heavy linen top sheet and the even heavier velvet or fur-lined counterpane. Then, in a slow, synchronized movement, they lift the layers and pull them up over you, tucking them in around your shoulders. The gesture, in any other context, would be one of tenderness and care. A parent tucking in a child is an act of love and protection. Here, it is an act of political theater. It is a public and formal sealing of the container. They are not tucking you in for your comfort. They are tucking you in for their status. To be the person who touches the royal sheets, who lays the final covering over the couple, is a demonstration of ultimate proximity to power. It is a right reserved for the very few, a silent declaration of their place at the absolute pinnacle of the social hierarchy. And here's a wonderfully paranoid detail. You might not know this probably wasn't the first ceremony this bed has seen today. In many royal courts, the daily making of the monarch's bed was a complex ritual in itself, performed by high-ranking gentlemen of the bedchamber. They would meticulously search the straw mattress for hidden daggers or pins, smooth every layer of linen, and fluff every pillow, all while following a strict, almost liturgical script. It was a security measure, designed to protect the monarch from assassination or witchcraft even in his sleep. So the bed you are lying in has already been searched, sanctified, and secured. It is the safest and least private place in the kingdom. As the heavy blankets settle over you, you feel a profound sense of entrapment. You are pinned down, not just by the weight of the bedding, but by the weight of tradition, of duty, of 1,000 years of expectation. You look at the faces of the people tucking you in. They are impassive, their expressions betraying nothing but the solemnity of the occasion. Historians, reading the sparse, factual accounts of these ceremonies, are left to debate the emotional reality of this moment. The documents tell us who tucked the couple in, but they never tell us how the couple felt. Was this ritual a comfort, a final, solemn blessing from their families and their sovereign before they were left to their duty? Or was it the final turn of the screw, the ultimate act of intrusion in a day defined by it, for people raised from birth to see their bodies as instruments of the state? Was it even considered strange? We can project our modern feelings of horror and claustrophobia onto the scene, but we can never truly know if you felt the same. All we know is that the ritual was performed, its symbolism understood by everyone in the room. The king, or your father, gives the counterpane one final, authoritative pat. The job is done. The tuckers in take one step back from the bed, their role in the drama complete. They have delivered you, undressed you, given you your pos set, and now tucked you in. There is only one thing left to do, the one gesture that will finally grant you a sliver of privacy. With the blankets pulled up to your chins, the final act of public ceremony begins. The highest ranking attendant, perhaps the king himself, steps toward the head of the bed. He takes hold of the thick, heavy fabric of the bed curtain, which until now has been tied back to the massive oak bedpost. This curtain is not a flimsy piece of modern drapery. It's made of dense, light-blocking material velvet, or a thick wool tapestry and lined with silk. It's an essential part of the bed, a feature designed not for privacy in the modern sense, but for warmth. In a drafty, stone-walled castle chamber, the four-poster bed with its heavy curtains created a small, insulated room within a minus room, trapping body heat and keeping out the cold. Tonight, however, its function is purely symbolic. With a slow, deliberate motion, The king or duke pulls the first curtain along its wooden rail. The sound is a soft, heavy whisper of fabric, a sound that seems to cut through the expectant silence of the room. He moves to the next post and does the same. Then, your mother or the queen draws the curtains on her side. One by one, the four sides of the bed are enclosed. The world of staring faces and flickering torchlights slowly being partitioned away from you. The last curtain is drawn, and you are plunged into a sudden, profound darkness. For the first time all day, you cannot see them, but you know, with a chilling certainty, that they are all still there. The drawing of the curtains is not a signal for the guests to leave, not yet. It is the creation of a thin, fragile, and almost entirely imaginary bubble of privacy in the middle of a crowded room. You are now in a small, dark, confined space with the stranger you married this morning. The only light is a faint, orange glow that leaks through the tiny gaps where the heavy curtains meet. The air inside the enclosure is instantly warmer, smelling of the lavender from the sheets and the wine on your own breath. Outside the flimsy wall of fabric, the world continues. You can hear everything. The sound is muffled, distorted, but unmistakable. This act of drawing the curtains is one of the most psychologically fascinating parts of the entire ritual. It is a tacit acknowledgement that what is about to happen is, on some level, a private act. Yet, it insists on keeping the witnesses just inches away, transforming them from spectators into an audience of listeners. It's a performance for the ears, not the eyes. The nature of these bed curtains is something that historians of decorative arts and domestic life study with great interest. The quality of the fabric, the richness of the embroidery, the presence of a family crest, it was all part of the bed's status as the most important and expensive piece of furniture in the house. These were not afterthoughts. They were central to the bed's function and symbolism. Some royal beds had summer and winter sets of curtains, lighter silks for warm weather and heavier wools for the cold. The ones chosen for your wedding night would be the most opulent, a final display of wealth at the very threshold of intimacy. The academic debate here revolves around the concept of privacy itself. Did it even exist as a desirable value for a medieval noble? Some scholars argue that our modern obsession with personal space and solitude is a recent invention, a product of the Enlightenment and the rise of the individual. In the medieval period, they contend, identity was communal. To be alone was to be vulnerable, powerless, to be surrounded by your family and retainers, even in your bedchamber, was a sign of your importance. Others argue that this is too simplistic, that human beings have always craved moments of withdrawal and personal intimacy, but that the structure of noble life made it a rare and precious commodity. Lying there in the dark, you are a living embodiment of that debate. You are in the most private space you can be, yet you are in the most public place imaginable. The fabric that separates you from the court is a physical boundary, yes, but it is also a powerful symbol of the tension between your role as a private individual and your function as a public institution. For a few moments, there is only the sound of your own breathing and the beating of your own heart. The darkness is a temporary relief, a shield for your eyes. But then, the sounds from beyond the curtain begin to creep in, reminding you that your shield is only made of cloth. You lie perfectly still in the warm, enclosed darkness, every one of your senses heightened. The world has been reduced to this small, fabric-lined box. The visual chaos is gone, but the auditory world is now overwhelmingly present. The thin veil of the curtains, which you hoped might offer some semblance of peace, instead acts as a strange sort of amplifier for every sound coming from the room outside. At first, there is a general, low-level hum, the sound of dozens of people breathing, a fabric rustling as someone shifts their weight from one foot to the other. It's the sound of a waiting crowd, the same sound you might hear in a theater just before the play begins. Except you are the play, and the stage is this bed, and there is no script. Then, the individual sounds begin to detach themselves from the general murmur. You hear a cough, quickly suppressed. Someone whispers a comment, and it's followed by a titter of muffled laughter. The sound is distorted by the fabric. The words indistinct, but the meaning is perfectly clear. They are talking about you. They are speculating. They are waiting. Each sound is an intrusion. A reminder of the audience just beyond the velvet. A wine goblet ceilings against another. The floorboards creak under the weight of someone pacing. The musicians, who had softened their tune, might have stopped playing altogether now, adding to the thick, expectant silence. Every tiny noise seems impossibly loud in the confines of your contained world. You are acutely aware of the other person in the bed. He is just a few inches away. A warm, breathing presence in the dark. You can probably hear his breathing. Too is it as shallow and rapid as your own. You are both prisoners in this bizarre public experiment, and you have no way of communicating, no way of offering each other comfort. Because you know that any word you whisper to each other will be listened for, and possibly even heard, by the people on the other side. This is the part of the ritual that often gets glossed over in historical accounts, but it is perhaps the most psychologically grueling. It is a waiting game, played under the most intense pressure imaginable. The crowd is not just there for the prelude. They are there to bear witness to the beginning of the consummation itself. They are waiting for a sound. What sound? Exactly. Well, this is a subject of some debate among historians who study the social history of the period. The chronicles are often frustratingly coy on this point. They might say that the couple was left to their own devices, but the context makes it clear this was a legal fiction. The witnesses needed some kind of auditory cue that the act of union had commenced. This didn't necessarily mean they waited for the entire act to be completed. More likely, they were waiting for the sounds of the couple beginning their intimacy, a rustle of sheets, a whispered endearment, a sigh. Once that initial auditory proof was provided, the majority of the guests might then be satisfied and finally, mercifully, depart. Here's a small, telling detail from the annals of royal life: bed chambers were rarely, if ever, soundproof. In an era before insulation and double glazing, sound traveled easily through stone corridors and wooden doors. Furthermore, the very concept of sound priming for privacy was alien. Important people needed to be able to call for help, and their guards needed to be able to hear signs of trouble. The lack of acoustic privacy was a feature, not a bug, of castle design. So you lie there, in a state of suspended animation. Does he reach for your hand in the dark? Is it a gesture of comfort, or just the beginning of his duty? Does one of you dare to speak first, to break the tension with a word that will be instantly swallowed by the listening silence? The pressure is immense. The fate of kingdoms, the continuation of dynasties, the honor of two great houses, it all comes down to this moment. In this bed, surrounded by a crowd of drunk, impatient, and deeply invested listeners. It's the ultimate performance anxiety, raised to the level of international politics. Every second that stretches on in silence is a second of failure. A second where the crowd's anticipation might curdle into impatience, or even suspicion. The murmurs from beyond the curtain are constant, whispering reminder of what is expected of you. You are not here to fall in love, you are here to produce a result, and the auditors are waiting for their report. The silence inside the curtained darkness stretches, becoming a thin, taut wire. Every second that passes feels like a year. The expectation from the world just outside the velvet is a physical force, pressing in on you, demanding a response. Finally, a decision is made. Though by whom? You're not quite sure. Perhaps he moves first. Or you do. A hand finds another in the dark. It is not a gesture of passion, but of mutual acknowledgement. A silent pact. It is time. Let us get this over with. There are no whispered words of love. There is no tender exploration. This is not the beginning of a romance. It is the fulfillment of a clause in a contract. It is a legal and biological act, stripped of every ounce of intimacy. You are two strangers, tasked with performing the most intimate of human connections as a public duty. For an audience you can hear breathing just beyond the drapes. It is a diplomatic mission conducted in the dark. and the future of two nations rests on its successful completion. As it begins, you might close your eyes, not out of passion, but to retreat to the one place they cannot follow you, the inside of your own mind. You might think of the lands your marriage has secured, the fields and rivers that are now safe from conflict because of this moment. You might think of your duty, the word that has been drilled into you since you were old enough to understand it. This is the ultimate expression of that duty, the physical embodiment of your purpose in this world. The act itself is awkward, fumbling, and profoundly unceremonious. It is a purely mechanical process, a joining of two bodies that have no knowledge of, or affection for, one another. You are two cogs in a great political machine, finally being fitted together so the wheels of state can turn. The only emotion you feel is a deep, soul-crushing self-consciousness, a constant awareness of the listening ears just feet away. Every rustle of the linen sheets, every involuntary sigh, is a piece of evidence being submitted to the jury of the court. This, of course, was the entire point, the legal validity of the marriage, and more importantly, the legitimacy of any heir produced, depended on the consummation. A marriage that was not consummated could, in theory, be annulled by the church. This legal principle was a crucial tool in high-stakes politics. A king who wanted to rid himself of a wife who had failed to produce a son might try to claim that the marriage was never consummated, thus rendering it invalid from the start. It was the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card in the game of dynastic marriage, and it all hinged on what happened or didn't happen on this one night. This pressure led to some truly bizarre legal situations. If a wife later petitioned for an annulment on the grounds of her husband's impotence, it could lead to a potency trial. This was a formal, quasi-medical examination where a man might have to prove his physical ability to a panel of court-appointed experts. Historians are still debating the exact procedures of these trials, as the records are often deliberately vague, but they represent the absolute extreme of the public's intrusion into the marital bed. They were rare, but the very fact that they could happen added yet another layer of pressure to the wedding night. You and your husband are not thinking of such legal extremities. You are just trying to get through the next few minutes. Perhaps, in the midst of this sterile transaction, there is a flicker of shared humanity, a moment where your eyes meet in the dim, glowing darkness, and you see not a duke or a prince, but a young man who is just as terrified and out of his depth as you are. A silent understanding passes between you. This is absurd, but we must do it. And then, it is over. The great, history-defining act is complete. There is no crescendo of feeling, only a quiet, deflating sense of relief. The duty is done. The contract is sealed. You are, finally and truly, a wife. The tension that has held your body rigid all day finally begins to recede, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its place. From beyond the curtain, you hear a subtle shift in the sounds. A low murmur of approval. A chair scrapes against the floor as someone stands up to leave. They have heard enough. The auditory proof has been supplied. The witnesses are satisfied. One by one, you can hear the footsteps receding. The great crowd that had filled your chamber now quietly, discreetly, melting away. Their job as guarantors complete. The ritual is, at long last, drawing to its close. The departure of the crowd is not a sudden, noisy exodus. It's a slow, quiet receding of a tide. The footsteps fade down the corridor. The murmur of voices dissolves into the vast silence of the sleeping castle. Soon, the only sound left is the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. A profound, almost shocking stillness settles over the room that was, just minutes ago, the epicenter of noise and public scrutiny. But you are not entirely alone. A few people remain, the most crucial of the witnesses, your mothers, perhaps, and one or two trusted, high-ranking ladies in waiting. They do not leave. They sit quietly on benches along the far wall of the chamber, their forms dark silhouettes against the firelight. They are the night watch. Their vigil is not for your safety, but for the integrity of the evidence. The night that follows is long and strange. You might sleep, eventually, from sheer, bone-deep exhaustion. It is a shallow, dreamless sleep, punctuated by the awareness of the silent observers in the room and the stranger lying beside you in the bed. Or you might lie awake, staring into the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the castle around you, feeling the immense, crushing weight of the future that has now, officially, begun. The first hint of dawn is a pale, grey light that begins to seep through the high, narrow window of the chamber. It is a cold, unforgiving light, and it signals the beginning of the final, and perhaps most humiliating, part of the entire ceremony, the last act of public proof. The ladies who kept watch through the night rise from their benches. They move towards the bed with a solemn, businesslike air. There is no gentleness in their movements now. This is a formal inspection. They do not speak to you. They are not concerned with your comfort or your feelings. Their focus is entirely on the bed itself. With practiced efficiency, they pull back the heavy counterpane and the top blankets, exposing the fine linen bed sheet beneath. And now, in the clear, merciless light of morning, they look for what they have been waiting all night to see: the proof. The physical evidence of consummated virginity, the bloodstains on the sheets. This was the matrimonial instrumente, the instruments of marriage, as they were sometimes clinically called. The sheet was the final document, the receipt that proved the transaction was complete and the goods delivered as advertised. Its inspection was a cold, forensic procedure. The ladies would examine the sheet, noting the presence and nature of the stains. There needed to be just enough to be convincing, but not so much as to suggest a difficulty or complication, which could be interpreted as a bad omen. The entire medieval and early modern concept of marriage, legitimacy, and honor was condensed into this single, stained piece of fabric. The visual proof was considered irrefutable. It protected the bride from any later accusation that she was not a virgin, and it protected the groom's family from the fear that the all-important firstborn heir might not be his. The stakes were astronomically high. This obsession with ocular proof led to some desperate and sometimes tragic situations. What if, for any number of perfectly natural reasons, there was no visible evidence? A bride, knowing her entire future and reputation depended on it, might resort to deception. There are historical whispers and literary accounts of brides smuggling in small vials of animal blood to create the required stain. A terrifying gamble that could result in disgrace or even death if discovered. The pressure to produce this specific biological sign was immense and unforgiving. Historians still argue about how universally this inspection was practiced. Was it a standard procedure for every noble wedding, or was it reserved only for the highest-level royal matches where the legitimacy of a future king was at stake? The evidence is scattered. Court chronicles might mention it in passing, while personal letters and diaries where the true emotional toll might be recorded are either silent on the matter or have not survived. It remains one of the most intimate and therefore most purely documented rituals of the past. For you, this moment is the culmination of a long and brutal process of public objectification. You are forced to lie there, exposed and silent, while these women scrutinize the most intimate evidence of your body's functions. It is a final, wordless violation. Once they are satisfied, the senior lady might give a curt, formal nod. The inspection is over. The sheet is then carefully removed from the bed. And what happened to it? In some very high-profile cases, the stained sheet would be displayed publicly, hung from a balcony of the castle for the crowds below to see. It was the ultimate, irrefutable press release, announcing to the entire world that the royal succession was secure, the marriage was valid, the future was safe, and your deepest humiliation was now a banner for public celebration. With the inspection complete and the evidence secured, the atmosphere in the room changes once more. The tension of the long night finally breaks, replaced by a kind of formal, subdued satisfaction. The job is done. The ladies in waiting, who moments before were called forensic inspectors, now revert to their normal roles. They bring you a basin of warm, scented water to wash, They help you into a fresh chemise and a simple morning gown. The movements are all routine, but nothing feels the same. As you step out of the bed, you feel a profound shift in your own body, in your own identity. Yesterday, you were a maiden, a daughter of your house. Today, you are a wife. The name you have carried your entire life is no longer entirely yours. You are now the Duchess of a new territory, the Countess of a new estate. Your official title has changed overnight. It's a verbal recategorization that reflects the physical and legal transformation you have just endured. You are not given time for quiet reflection. You are expected to appear in public, to attend a morning mass and then to break your fast with the court. As you are being dressed, you catch your reflection in that same silvered mirror from yesterday. The face that looks back at you is the same, perhaps a little paler, with darker circles under the eyes. But the person behind that face feels like a stranger. The girl from yesterday is gone, and this new woman, this wife, is someone you do not yet know. The greatest change, however, is not in your name or your title. It is in the new, singular burden that has been placed upon your shoulders, with the consummation verified. A new clock has started ticking. It is an invisible, relentless timer, and it is measuring the months until you produce an heir. Yesterday, your value was in your dowry and your proven virginity. Today, and for the rest of your life, your value will be measured by your fertility, specifically, your ability to produce a healthy son. This was the sole, overarching purpose of your marriage. The entire reason for the pageantry and the ritualized humiliation. You were not married to be a companion or a partner in the modern sense. You were married to be a vessel, a beautiful, high-born incubator for the next generation of power. This pressure was immediate and all-encompassing. From this morning on, your body would be a subject of public speculation in a new way. Every month would be watched. The court gossips, who yesterday were whispering about the wedding night, would now be whispering about the state of your womb. Is she looking a little fuller in the waist? Did she seem nauseous at breakfast? Your body is no longer your own private concern. It is a matter of state interest. The medical understanding of reproduction at the time was, to put it mildly, a bit fuzzy. Theories inherited from ancient Greek physicians like Galen were mixed with folk wisdom and religious doctrine. Historians of science and medicine are still untangling these complex belief systems. It was generally believed that both the man and the woman produced a seed, and that the health and gender of the child depended on the balance of humors in the parents' bodies at the moment of conception. This meant that if you failed to conceive, or if you produced only daughters, the blame could be placed squarely on you. Your diet was wrong, your temperament was too cold, or your piety was insufficient. And so, from this day forward, your life would be a regimen designed to maximize your fertility. You would be prescribed certain foods, rich meats, warming spices. You would be advised to avoid others' cool, watery vegetables. You would be given religious almsgivings to wear and specific prayers to recite to saints known for their intercession in matters of childbirth. Your every action would be viewed through the lens of procreation. As you are finely dressed and ready to face the court, your mother might give you a final piece of advice, her voice low and serious. She will not speak of love or happiness. She will speak of duty. She will remind you that the family's honor, the kingdom's stability, and your own position in this new court all depend on one thing. You must get with child. And it must be a boy. The burden is now yours, and yours alone. You walk out of the bedchamber and back into the world. The corridor that was a river of noise and torchlight last night is now quiet and cool, bathed in the calm, grey light of morning. But as you enter the great hall for the morning meal, the silence is broken. A wave of attention washes over you, 100 heads turning in your direction. The feeling of being watched has not ended. It has merely changed its flavor. Last night, the gazers were a mixture of lewd curiosity, drunken excitement, and ritual participation. This morning, they are different. They are knowing. Every single person in this room, from the highest lord to the lowest serving boy, knows exactly what happened in your bedchamber last night. Or rather, they know that the required event took place. The public procession, the bedding, the waiting outside the curtains, it has made them all participants. And now they look at you with a new, proprietary interest. You are no longer the untouched, symbolic maiden. You are a woman whose new status has been publicly verified. The men look at you with a changed expression. Some smirk, a kind of coarse acknowledgement of what your husband has achieved. Others look at you with a new, more serious respect. You have fulfilled your primary function. You have passed the test. The women's gazes are more complex, and perhaps more difficult to endure. The older, married women look at you with an expression of solidarity, a silent welcome to their ranks. It's a look that says, "We have all been through this. Now you are one of us." There is a kind of grim camaraderie in it, but it is not comforting. It is a confirmation that your experience, which felt so intensely personal and strained, was utterly routine. The younger, unmarried girls look at you with a mixture of awe, envy, and undisguised fascination. You are a vision of their own future, a living preview of the ordeal that awaits them. As you take your seat at the high table, next to your husband, you have to navigate this new social landscape. People come to pay their respects, to offer their formal congratulations. God give you joy, my lady. May your union be a fruitful one. Every pleasantry is freighted with double meaning. Every smile seems to contain a hidden wink. They are all in on the secret, a secret that is about your own body. This shared, public knowledge of the consummation is a concept that is almost impossible for the modern mind to fully grasp. In a world obsessed with privacy, the idea is horrifying. But in the medieval court, this shared knowledge was a form of social glue. It bound the community together. Your marriage was not a private affair between two people. It was a communal investment. Then no, everyone was checking on their investment's performance. One of the strange, unwritten rules of courtly life was the art of speaking about things without speaking about them directly. This is a topic that literary historians and scholars of court culture find fascinating. There was a whole vocabulary of euphemism and innuendo that allowed people to discuss the most intimate matters in a public setting. So a lord might congratulate your husband on his successful hunt or praise your glowing complexion this morning. Everyone would know exactly what was being said. But the thin veil of courtly language kept it from being overtly crude. It was a game of words, and you now had to learn the rules very, very quickly. And what of your husband, the man you sit beside, who is receiving hearty, congratulatory slaps on the back from his friends? Does he meet your eye? Is there a new intimacy between you, forged in the crucible of last night's shared ordeal? Or is there just a deeper, more profound awkwardness? You have shared the most intimate of physical acts, yet you still do not know each other. You don't know if he is kind or cruel, witty or dull. You know the physical facts of his body, but the landscape of his mind is a complete mystery. For him, the public scrutiny is different, but just as intense. His reputation as a man, the husband, and a future leader has just been publicly ratified. He has proven his virility. He has done his dynastic duty. The smirks and congratulations directed at him are a confirmation of his status. While you were the passive object of the ritual, he was the active agent. His honor was at stake in a different way. And so you sit, sipping from a cup of watered wine, picking at a piece of bread. You smile. You nod. You accept the congratulations. You perform the role of the happy, successful bride. You are a living symbol of a successful alliance, a walking embodiment of a secure succession. Everyone looks at you and sees a future filled with peace and prosperity. All you can feel is the phantom weight of their knowing eyes. You sit at the high table. The successful bride, the verified wife. The system has worked. The ritual has run its course, from the ink on the treaty to the stain on the sheet. But as you look around the great hall, a cold, nagging thought might enter your mind. What if it hadn't? What if something had gone wrong? The entire edifice of this ceremony, with its immense cost, political significance, and psychological pressure, was built on the assumption of a successful outcome. But sometimes, despite all the prayers, post-sex, and public pressure, the consummation failed. And when it did, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for the couple, but for the entire kingdom. Failure could happen for a number of reasons. The most commonly cited in annulment cases was the groom's impotence. In a world where a man's worth was so closely tied to his virility, the inability to perform his marital duty was a source of profound public shame. It wasn't just a personal failing, it was a political disaster. An impotent duke or king could not produce an heir, leaving his lands vulnerable to succession crises and civil war upon his death. The pressure on your new husband was not just to perform, but to be seen as being able to perform. If, after a period of time, the marriage remained unconsummated, the wife or her family could petition the church for an annulment. This would launch a deeply humiliating investigation. As we touched on before, this could involve the dreaded potency trial, where the husband would have to prove his physical capabilities to a panel of churchmen and physicians. But it also involved an intimate physical examination of the wife by a group of experienced matrons to verify that she was, indeed, still a virgin. Imagine having to endure that invasive scrutiny, not in the semi-privacy of the dorm bedchamber, but in a formal, legal setting. But it wasn't always the man's fault. Sometimes, the failure was ascribed to the bride. A bride might refuse, an act of almost unthinkable rebellion. This was incredibly rare, as the consequences would be dire. She could be accused of defying not just her husband and father, but God himself. She might be disowned, stripped of her titles and lands, and possibly confined to a convent for the rest of her life, her name a byword for shame and disobedience. Then there was the more nebulous, and to the medieval mind, more terrifying reason for failure: witchcraft. As the priest's blessing of the bedchamber suggested, there was a genuine and widespread belief that a curse, or malefic IUM, could be placed upon a couple to prevent their union. A jealous rival, a spurned lover, or a political enemy could hire a sorcerer to tie the knot, a form of sympathetic magic that would render the groom impotent or the bride barren. Historians who study the history of witchcraft and magic find that accusations of this specific kind of curse were surprisingly common. If a powerful lord's marriage failed, it was often easier and more politically convenient to blame an external, supernatural enemy than to admit to a personal, physical failing. It shifted the blame and turned a personal humiliation into a righteous cause. A witch hunt could be launched, providing a convenient scapegoat for the dynastic failure. The question of what truly constituted consummation in the eyes of the church's canon lawyers is a subject of fascinatedly complex debate. Was simple penetration enough? Or was the emission of seed required for the act to be legally and spiritually complete? The theological arguments were intricate and often contradictory, borrowing from ancient medical texts and dense philosophical treatises. For the people on the ground, however, the definition was brutally simple: a successful consummation was one that could, and hopefully would, lead to a pregnancy. If the bedding ceremony failed on the night, and the sheets were clean in the morning, it would have been a moment of silent, creeping panic for the family. The ladies-in-waiting would have likely been sworn to secrecy. The couple would be given another chance, and another, in the hopes that the issue was merely a case of nerves. But the whispers would begin. The lack of a public display of the stained sheet would be noted. The court would start to buzz with rumor and speculation. The carefully constructed image of a perfect, powerful union would begin to crack, and through those cracks, the walls of political instability would begin to peer. Your own quiet failure could become the spark that lit a dynastic fire. As you sat there, contemplating the high-stakes drama of your own wedding night, a quiet thought might drift into your mind. You looked down from the high table, over the sea of nobles and courtiers, past the guards at the door, and out, in your imagination, to the fields and villages that surround this great stone castle. What about them? Did the farmers, the blacksmiths, the weavers, the vast majority of the population endure anything like this? Was every wedding night in this kingdom a public spectacle? The short, and perhaps comforting, answer is no. The elaborate, witness-heavy bedding ceremony was almost exclusively a ritual for the rich and powerful. It was a practice born of property, not people. For a common peasant couple, a marriage was a much simpler, though still significant, affair. Their union wasn't about merging territories or securing a royal succession. It was about creating a new family unit for labor and survival. Their dowry might be a single cow, a few pots and pans, or a flock of chickens. Their wedding feast would be a humble celebration in their village, with their neighbors bringing dishes to share. Their life was not state business, so their privacy, paradoxically, was far more protected than yours. This is not to say their weddings were without their own rituals. They had their own rich tapestry of folk customs, traditions that were often far older than the courtly ceremonies of the nobility. They would have their own version of the noisy procession, the Charivari, but its purpose was often different, sometimes to celebrate, but other times to mock a couple the village disapproved of, such as a widower marrying a much younger woman. They had their own fertility symbols, their own special foods, their own blessings for the marriage bed. But the key difference was the absence of the legalistic need for witnesses to the consummation. There was no dynasty at stake. The legitimacy of their children was important for inheritance of their small plot of land, of course, but it wasn't a matter of international concern. The community's validation of the marriage came from the couple living together, working together, and being seen as a husband and wife in their daily lives. The proof of their union was the lives they built, not a stain on a sheet from a single night. This vast difference in marital customs between the classes is a major focus for social historians. They piece together the story of non-noble life from far more scattered and difficult sources: church court records detailing disputes, village charters, folk songs, and archaeology, unlike the lives of kings and queens, which were documented in official chronicles. The lives of ordinary people have to be excavated from the margins of history. There is, however, an interesting and ongoing debate about the so-called droit du Seigneur, or right of the Lord. This is the infamous, supposed right of a feudal lord to sleep with the bride of one of his vassals on her wedding night. It's a powerful and disturbing image that has lodged itself firmly in the popular imagination about the Middle Ages. But did it actually exist? The overwhelming consensus among modern historians is that it was almost certainly a myth. There is no reliable legal or historical evidence that this was a formally recognized right. Instead, it seems to have been a story, a piece of anti-feudal propaganda that became popular much later, during the Enlightenment, as a way to paint the old regime as tyrannical and barbaric. While a cruel lord could certainly abuse his power in any number of ways, the idea of a legally sanctioned first night rite is not supported by the evidence. It's a powerful fiction that tells us more about how later ages viewed the medieval past than about the reality of a peasant wedding night. So, while the farmer's daughter in the village below is also getting married today, her experience is worlds away from yours. Her night will likely be private. Her fears will be her own, not the subject of public commentary. Her future will be hard, filled with labor you can barely imagine. But her body, in this one specific way, is more her own than yours will ever be. You are the jewel of the kingdom, but you are also its most gilded and carefully watched prisoner. Her freedom is in her obscurity, a luxury your high birth has denied you. Years begin to pass. The memory of your wedding night, once a raw and searing humiliation, softens with time, becoming a strange, dreamlike story you can scarcely believe you endured. You have fulfilled your duty. A son, and perhaps other children, now run through the castle corridors. Your marriage has settled into a routine, a partnership based on shared responsibilities and the management of a great household. The stranger from the altar has become a familiar presence, a man whose habits and moods you know as well as your own. And as you grow older, you begin to notice a subtle but profound shift in the world around you. The old ways, the brutal, Public rituals that defined your own entry into marriage are beginning to seem a little old-fashioned, a little crude. When your own children are of age to be married, the ceremonies, while still grand, are noticeably different. The raw, invasive energy of your own wedding day has been toned down, replaced by a new emphasis on decorum and sentiment. The slow death of the public bedding ceremony was not a single event, but a gradual fading away. A slow turning of a great cultural tide over several centuries. It didn't disappear because of an law or royal decree. It faded because of the rise of a radical, powerful new idea: privacy. This wasn't a concept that appeared overnight. Its seeds were planted in the philosophical and religious movements of the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Thinkers began to place a new emphasis on the individual's inner life, personal conscience, and private devotion. The Protestant Reformation, in particular, played a huge role. By challenging the role of the priest as an intermediary and emphasizing a direct, personal relationship with God, it helped to foster a new sense of the self as a private entity. This new way of thinking slowly began to reshape the physical world. Castle and palace architecture started to change. Instead of suites of rooms that you had to walk through to get to the next, architects began designing something revolutionary: the corridor. This simple innovation meant that rooms could now have their own private entrances. You no longer had to walk through someone's bedroom to get to your own. The locked door became a more common feature, a symbol of a new desire to separate the public self from the private self. The very nature of marriage itself was also undergoing a slow transformation. While it remained, for the nobility, primarily a strategic alliance, the language of love and personal affection began to creep into the discourse. The idea that a husband and wife should be companions, that they should share a genuine emotional bond, started to gain traction. This new ideal of companionate marriage was at odds with the crude, transactional nature of the old public bedding ritual. A ceremony designed to verify a property transfer seemed increasingly inappropriate for a union that was now supposed to involve personal feeling. Historians who study the history of emotions and the family debate the timeline and the driving forces behind this great shift. Was it a top-down change, driven by intellectuals and theologians, or was it a bottom-up evolution, as the rising merchant classes, with their smaller, more private homes, began to create a new model for family life that the aristocracy slowly began to emulate? The answer, as is so often the case, is likely a complex interplay of both. You see the changes in the small details. At your daughter's wedding, the feast is still magnificent, but the songs are more courtly, the jokes less crude. The procession to the bedchamber is a much smaller, more dignified affair, involving only the immediate family, and most significantly, when the couple enters their chamber, the family says their good nights at the door. They are not followed inside. The drawing of the bed curtains, if it happens at all, is now a private act, not a public one. The need for witnesses has been replaced by a new respect for the sanctity of the marital chamber. The old ritual doesn't vanish completely overnight. It leaves behind ghosts, faint echoes of its former self, but the core of it, the crowd in the bedroom, the public undressing, the waiting and listening, has become a thing of the past. It is now seen as something our ancestors did, a barbaric custom from a less refined age. Your own experience is becoming a historical anecdote, a story to be whispered about, a testament to how much the world has changed. You have lived long enough to see the cage of your wedding night dismantled, its bars melted down by the warm, slow fire of a new idea. The idea that some things, some moments, should belong only to the people inside them. You are an old woman now, sitting by a window in a comfortable, private chamber, a solar, warmed by the afternoon sun. The castle is quiet. You watch your grandchildren playing in the gardens below. Their arranged marriages still years in the future. Their lives, you know, will be different from yours. The world has continued to turn, to change. The brutal, public honesty of your youth has been replaced by a more veiled and sophisticated courtly life. The raw assertion of power has given way to the subtle dance of influence. And the wedding ceremony. It is now an entirely different creature. It is still a public spectacle. Of course, a grand display of wealth and status. But its focus has shifted. It is now a performance of romance, of sentiment. The bride wears a white gown. The couple exchanges vows filled with the language of love and devotion, not just duty and contract. The ritual that was once about the public verification of a physical transfer is now about the public display of an emotional bond. Yet, as you think back on the strange, distant pageant of your own wedding, you can see its ghosts. The faint, shimmering after images of those ancient rituals, still haunting the modern ceremony. They are like old family heirlooms. Their original purpose forgotten, kept only for the sake of tradition. Think of the modern bride, walking down the aisle on her father's arm. It is seen today as a sweet, sentimental moment, but it is the direct descendant of your own walk from the great hall to the church porch. A clear, public demonstration of the transfer of a woman from the authority of her father to the authority of her husband. It is a property transfer, softened by sentiment and set to organ music, and the bridesmaids and groomsmen. Today, they are there for moral support and to make sure the rings don't get lost, but they are the ghosts of the two boisterous, competing factions that escorted you to the bedchamber, the ones who undressed you and fought for your stockings. Their modern role is a polite, sanitized echo of a much more hands-on, invasive function. Even the tradition of the wedding toast, the clinking of glasses and the call for the couple to kiss, it's a faint echo of that shared cup of spiced posset. The public, communal drink meant to bless the couple with fertility and fortitude before they were put to bed. The modern kiss is a symbol of love, but the ancient drink was a tool for procreation. And what about the gazetos? That bizarre, chaotic scramble to pull the stockings from your legs while you sat in bed has been tamed, sterilized, and turned into a slightly awkward but accepted part of the reception. The modern groom removes the garter from his bride's leg himself, a gesture of playful intimacy, and tosses it to his friends. Few of them know that they are reenacting a ritual that was once a boisterous, public assault on the bride, a scramble for a potent fertility token. The original meaning is gone, leaving only the strange, disembodied gesture behind. The question of which modern wedding traditions are direct descendants of these older, cruder rituals is a playground for folklorists and anthropologists. They trace the threads back through time, debating the exact lineage of a particular gesture or custom. Is the tossing of the bouquet a replacement for the stocking fling, a less invasive way for guests to scramble for a piece of the bride's good luck? The lines are often blurry, the connections speculative, but the echoes are undeniably there. The greatest echo, however, is the most subtle. It is the simple fact that a wedding remains, at its core, a public event. The deep-seated need to have the community witness and validate the union has never gone away. The audience has just moved from the bedchamber to the church pew, from the other side of the curtain to the other side of a social media feed. The desire for public proof has not vanished. It has simply changed its form. You look out the window again. The sun is lower in the sky, casting long, soft shadows across the garden. Your story, which began with the scratch of a quill on parchment, is ending in the quiet rustle of leaves in the breeze. The world has changed, and you have changed with it. But you know that the past is never truly gone. It just puts on a new set of clothes, learns some prettier manners, and continues to walk among us. Its old, wild heart still beating faintly beneath the surface. And so, the story of this long and demanding day, this journey from public contract to private union, finally finds its quiet end. The echoes of the songs and the shouts from the great hall have faded, replaced by the gentle, steady breathing of a world asleep. The flickering torchlight has given way to the soft, cool light of the moon, which asks nothing of you, which sees nothing, but simply is. You can feel the weight of the past begin to lift, dissolving like mist in the morning sun, leaving only a sense of deep, profound, and well-earned rest. The characters in our story, who felt so much pressure, so much scrutiny, are at peace now. Their duties are done, their performances are over, and you, who have walked alongside them, can also let go of all performance, of all duty. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to witness. There is only this comfortable darkness, this gentle quiet. You can allow your own mind to drift away from the stone walls of the castle, away from the heavy velvet curtains, and into a space that is truly, completely your own, a space of effortless, easy slumber. Our journey together tonight ends here, in this quiet place. Should you need another tale to accompany you further into rest, my library of stories is always open for you. May your dreams be kind. Good night.